Hey guys, and welcome back to video 3 in this course. So today this tutorial is going to be running through some more complex editing techniques and basically showing you guys how you can go ahead and put some of the techniques that you guys have learned already into starting creating some images. So in the next tutorial we're going to be looking at some even more complicated techniques, things like reflections and stuff like that. So in this video we're going to be looking at different techniques of cutting out objects and pasting them into your final image. As well as that, we're going to be looking at different ways you can add lighting to your images and different effects to make the picture look a little bit more realistic. So without any further ado, let's start with today's video. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and just basically creating an image. I feel like that's the best way you guys can learn how to use these different techniques and these tools to create a final piece. So what I've done is I've imported 4 different photos here that I'm going to go ahead and combine into one final image. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn off all the ones I don't need first, and I'm going to start from my background and I'm going to work my way towards my foreground. We're going to come down and we're just going to label this background, and then what we're going to do is we're going to drag it into a position that we think is going to be alright. So I think around about in the center should be pretty good. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to show you guys how you can cut out a sky, or you can cut out some mountains, or we're going to be using it again later to cut out this object, and then again for the sand dunes, and then finally for our character who's going to be standing at the front. So this technique you can use for lots of different images, and I'm going to show you 2 ways you can go about doing this. First method is by using the quick selection tool. So you can come up here and you should see this little brush tool with a little dotted line around it. So you can click on that and you should get this little tool here. Now what you can do is you can increase the brush size by pressing your square bracket. So the closed square bracket makes it larger and then the open square bracket makes it smaller. So you can use this and basically you can drag this across the area that you want to cut out, and it should select that region. So as you can see, it's done a pretty good job at the moment. It's kind of gone around the edges of the mountains, but what it hasn't done is up here you can see it's kind of doesn't really know that this part here is part of the mountains, not part of the sky. So we're going to correct that by again selecting this. The shortcut on the Mac is pressing W, and you can press Option or Alt, and that's going to give you this minus in the middle of the circle as well. So we can use that, and we're just basically going to click around the bits that we don't want to be selected. And of course, if you want to be more precise, you can just use your open square bracket to make it smaller, press Alt again, and then go ahead and click around these regions that you don't want to be cut out. So for example down here on the snow, you can go ahead and do that. Okay, so now we've made our selection, I'm going to be telling you guys a technique that we can use to make sure that we're not doing destructive editing. And that basically means that when we go ahead and we cut this sky out, if we do it slightly incorrectly, we can always come back at a later stage and add it back in again. So the way we're going to do that is by using masks. So what we want to do is come down to our masks button down here. That's the little square with the black circle in the middle, and all you want to do is click that once, and that will create a mask for you. Now as you can see at the moment, it has deleted the wrong part of the image. So I only wanted the mountains and I didn't want the sky, and it's done in the completely opposite way. So what we can do is we're going to come and we're going to select our mask down here. We're going to select image on the top bar, come down to adjustments, and then scroll down to invert. Or on a Mac you can press Command I as a shortcut, and that's basically going to flip it around for you. So now you can see you've got the mountains and you no longer have the sky. Now as you can see here, we have this black line where it didn't really kind of get the edge of the image. It always does that. So what you can do is you can select your brush tool, that's down here, or you can press B. Then you want to make sure your foreground color is selected on black, and then you can basically adjust the size of your brush by pressing again the open bracket to make it smaller, and then you can basically brush over the area that you want to remove. So that's one way of doing that. Okay, so now I've put the background in. What I want to do is show you guys how you can replace the sky. So we've removed it. So now what I'm going to show you is how you can put in a new sky. So the way we're going to go ahead and do that, I'm going to show you 2 ways you can go ahead and make a sky. So the first is the most simplest way, and that is by downloading an image of a separate sky that you want to put into your image. So for example, this is an image I've downloaded before, and let's say we wanted to use this sky, but we didn't necessarily want these mountains, we wanted the mountains that we've cut out here. Then what we can do is drop this, import this image in, which we showed you how to do in the previous tutorial. So once you've imported it in, you want to drag it below your background layer, so it's behind your mountains. And then what you want to do is come up and select your movement tool, or press V, and then select the sky just by clicking it, and then you can drag it around to the position you want. So as you move it around, do take note of how you want the sky to look. So at the moment I'm thinking that this looks pretty decent, and judging by the picture we've got this nice darker pink towards the horizon line, so that would make more sense if that was towards my horizon line as well. After all, if it was down there like that, it looks a little bit strange, so we do want to keep that into mind when we're doing these images. So this is what I'm going to do now. I've put that into the background, but of course I've also got these mountains in the background, which I don't necessarily want. It does kind of work with the image, but I don't really want them, so I'm going to show you guys how you can go ahead and remove those. First thing you can obviously do is you can transform this and make it slightly larger and increase the scale. So you can do that by coming up to Edit and then scrolling down to Free Transform, and then that's going to give you your box, which you can go ahead and increase the size. So we're going to press Shift, and then we're just going to drag it out so we can increase the scale of our sky. That would just basically remove the mountains off the corner of the screen, so we no longer have those there anymore. And then you can go ahead and you can move it around to see if there's a better location. But this one seems to be the best one that I can get if I do it that way. That's the first technique of removing the mountains from the sky. The second thing I'm going to show you guys is using the clone tool. So you should have learned this technique in the previous video as well, but I'm just going to go ahead and explain it a little bit more again in this video. So what you want to do is come down and select your clone tool over here. Once you've clicked on it, you should get a brush kind of thing looking like this. Now, if you have this circle with the black line through it again, remember this means the image that you're about to edit hasn't been rasterized. So you can either do that just by clicking on the image and it will tell you, do you want to rasterize this, and you can select OK. Or you can come down to the image, you can do Control click, and then you can scroll down and then just select rasterize layer. That means that the image is now ready to go ahead and be edited. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and show you the first method to remove these mountains from the background. So you want to press Alt or Option and select a region of the sky that is similar to the region that you want to replace. So for example here, then I can go ahead and I can just basically brush over where the mountains were. And as you can see, it's removing it and replacing it with that one color that is in the area above it. Okay, so that's the way that you can get rid of the mountains there. And as you can see, it's worked quite well, but obviously you can see a little bit around here. You can see that the colors don't really match up too well. So the next technique that you can also do is go ahead and select your brush tool, press Alt, that will give you your color picker. Select the color around here in between the two regions that you kind of want to paint over, and then make sure your opacity is on about 50%, 40%, something like that. Something quite low that you can kind of just brush over that region where they kind of cross. So you can just kind of match them up. Maybe select a pink as well, just kind of blend the two together. It will make it look slightly more realistic than it would if you just left it as the pen tool. Okay, so there we go. We have now imported a new sky into our image. Okay, so when we're making this image, what you do want to take into account is where the light is coming from. So at the moment, if we look at our picture of our mountain, it is sunset, it is kind of evening time, but we can see there's a little bit of light on the edges of the mountains here, which kind of suggests that we've got a sun in the bottom region down here somewhere, and we're just getting the tips of the rays bouncing off the tops of the mountains. So what I like to do is come down and create a new layer, and then we're going to select our brush tool again, and we're basically going to create an artificial sun. And then we're going to increase our brush size by pressing again the close square bracket. And then basically what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of a glow behind the mountains to kind of show that there is a little bit of a light source below the mountains, but we can't really see it. So we're going to do that by basically just brushing down here away from the edge of the mountain so you can't see a clear edge. And because your hardness is on 0, it's going to make it look a little bit like you're getting a bit of a glow around the edge of the mountains. So you can do that just by brushing across like that. Now, of course, because it's white, it is going to look a little bit weird. So we're going to set the opacity and we're going to bring that down a little bit, just so it blends in a little bit more with the pinks. As well as that, I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm also going to select, using Alt, and select one of these pink colors here, and then just make it slightly more vivid by bringing it up towards the right, towards the corner up here. And we're going to do exactly the same again, just brush around with the pink, just to kind of give it a little bit more of a pink glow, maybe a little bit more pink, a little bit more vibrant, just so we've got that kind of feel as if there's a light source below, behind the mountains. Now don't worry if you're getting down here, the brush showing off down here. You can use the eraser, come up and press E, or you can select the eraser here and just basically brush it away. So once I've done that, I'm going to drag this pink layer below my white layer. So that basically just means that I can give my white glow a little bit more of a pink glow. And again, I'm going to take the opacity down just a little bit, so it's a little bit more subtle. And there we go, we have a nice bit of lighting coming behind the mountains. So I'm going to turn those off so you guys can see what it looked like before, and there's after. Okay, so now what we've done is I've shown you guys how to replace the sky, and I've shown you how to put some lighting in the background to make it look a little bit more realistic. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue building up the image and working our way to the front. So again, you learnt the first technique of go ahead and cutting out the sky by using the quick selection tool. Now I'm going to show you another technique that you guys can use. So again, we're going to turn on another layer. So this is going to be our middle ground or our foreground. So we're going to use these sand dunes here. Now the idea is we want to cut out the sky again and this guy standing on the hill. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, as opposed to using the quick selection tool, is we're going to come down and we're going to select the pen tool, or we're going to press P. Make sure your fill is on nothing, and as well your stroke is on nothing. So what we're going to do now is we're basically going to want to cut out the sky and this guy standing on the sand dune. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to basically click, and we're going to click around the edges of the sand dunes. So basically follow the contour of the hill and work your way across the image. So I'm just going to speed this process up so you guys can see what I've done in the end. Now what I've done is I've gone ahead and selected around the edges of the sand dunes. So I'm going to click to the top here and just basically cut around the sky and come back and select the first square. Okay, so now we've made the selection, we're going to press Control and then click, and we're going to come down and we're going to click Make Selection. Now, if you're wanting to cut something out with a really sharp edge, you want to keep your feather radius on 0 pixels. If you want this to be a little bit blurred and kind of cross over and do like a bit of a fade out to increase your feather radius, but we're going to leave this at 0, so we're going to click OK. And as you can see, it's now put these marching ants around our sand dunes. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to select our image down here, and I'm going to do the same again by selecting the mask tool. So now that's done the same thing again, it's selected the sky, so we're going to invert it. We're going to invert it by coming to Image, scroll down to Adjustments, and then come down to Invert, or press Command I. So now what we're going to do is we're going to increase the size of these sand dunes, where we're going to come up to Edit and scroll down to Free Transform, or press Command T, and then we're going to press Shift, and I'm just going to drag it slightly larger. So now you've got to a size that you wanted. What I'm going to go ahead now and put in this gateway here. So we're going to drag this above our sand dunes, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to use the same technique to cut this out. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out this, and then I will get back to you once I've done. I've gone ahead and I've cut around the edge around here, and I've made my selection. Now what I've decided to do is, as opposed to going around and doing the same thing again on the right hand side, because this image is basically symmetrical, what I'm just going to do is cut out this part, and then I'm going to duplicate it and then flip it to show you guys how you can go ahead and kind of create this a little bit shorter if you have something that's symmetrical. So now I'm just going to go ahead and follow this around, and then I can go ahead and cut this out. So I'm going to bring this down to the center point, so about here, and then back across. Now what I'm going to do is do the same thing again, do Control, click, scroll down to Make Selection, leave that as 1 pixel, select OK, select my layer down here, then we're going to select our mask, and then again we're going to want to come ahead and we're going to want to flip that around. So now, there we go, we've now got it cut out and we've flipped it. So what I've decided to do now is, as opposed to go ahead and doing exactly the same thing on the right hand side, I'm just going to cut this out and I'm going to duplicate it across. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my marquee tool up here. I'm going to do Control click to make sure we've got the rectangular one, and then we're going to scroll across. We're basically just going to fill this one in black on our mask down here. So we're going to do Control click, fill, and we're going to make sure this is on black, select OK, and there we go, that's cut that out nicely for us. I'm going to do the same for the bottom part here, to our center point, do Control click, fill, OK. Then if you want to get rid of this, you can do Command D. Okay, so now what I've done is I've relocated it into the position that I wanted it to be in, and I'm going to duplicate this layer. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Control click over here, and then we're going to scroll down to Duplicate Layer. Then we want to select the document that we're in, so that's Untitled 1, and we're just going to click OK. You can also, in a shortcut, press Command J, and that will just duplicate it all for you. Edit, scroll down to Transform, and then select Flip Horizontal, and there we go, that has now flipped it around. So now we have our image roughly where we want it. What I'm going to do now is just move everything around into positions that I want before we go ahead and do any more editing. Okay, so now I've got that in the center of the image. What I'm going to show you guys now is how you can blend these in to the sand dunes. So I'm going to show you guys how you can go ahead and you can blend this into your sand dunes. So what we're going to do now is we're going to select our first layer here, come down onto our mask selection, select our brush tool, or select B, make sure our foreground color is on black, and then make sure our hardness is on 0%. Then we're going to zoom in, and basically what we're going to do is we're just going to rub out the bits that we don't want. So we're going to increase this, and we're just going to kind of rub away the sharp edges and the corners that wouldn't necessarily be there, and we're going to basically pretend that this was dug into the sand. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to put our hardness up to 100% and just kind of rub around so it looks like it was stuffed into the sand and the sand's blown up around it. Bring away these hard corners here. Okay, so now that looks a little bit more like it was dug into the sand. And we're going to do the same with the one on the right hand side here as well. Okay, so finally in this tutorial what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how you can use the dodge and burn tool to kind of put some lighting into your images and make it look a little bit more realistic. So this image will not look final. If you want to see a final version of us doing a complete edit from start to finish with using all the techniques you're going to learn throughout this entire course, that will be in the final video. That's going to be in video 5. But today I'm just going to focus on the few techniques. So I've taught you guys how you can go ahead and you can cut out the sky, how you can replace it and put this little glow, add some light into it, and then how you can cut things out and blend things in a little bit better. So that's been today's video. It's been a little bit more about blending things in, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to finally show you guys how you can add some lighting effects. So the first of the 2 techniques I'm going to show you is using the dodge and burn tool. The dodge and burn tool is this lollipop shaped tool over here. So we're going to select that. The dodge is going to make it lighter and the burn is going to make it darker. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to select a certain part of the image. So for example, I'm going to show you guys how we can make this sand dune look a little bit darker because it doesn't really fit with our nighttime or evening mountains in the background. So we're going to select our layer here. And we're going to, again, this is not rasterized, so we're going to click it and we're going to make sure it's rasterized. Okay, so now we've got our image selected. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and dodge and burn this. So dodge is going to make it lighter and burn is going to make it darker. So if it's selected on the lollipop, that means it's on the dodge, which means if you go ahead and you brush over it, it's going to make the image a lot brighter. And you can go ahead and doing that until it basically whites out. And if you click Alt or Option, it's going to go ahead and it's going to make it darker. So we're going to be using the burn tool at the moment. So I'm just going to run over it a couple of times just to make it a little bit darker. And then what we're going to do is we're going to think about where the light is falling. This part is really crucial when you go ahead and you make these images. And we can see up here, the light is coming from the right hand side and hitting the corners of the mountains over here. So we're going to try and recreate that effect on our sand dune. We're going to basically start making the left hand side of our sand dune dark and the right hand side a little bit lighter. So using our burn, we're going to go ahead and brush over the bottom bits down here, making it a little bit darker, thinking about where the light is falling all the meanwhile while we're doing this. So down the bottom it's going to be very dark because the light's not going to be reaching down there, and on this side, just to make it look a little bit more uniform and a little bit of a nice effect on it, just going to make it a little bit brighter around here. Now the light's going to catch the rim of this, so I'm just going to go ahead and now as the light hits it, it's going to catch the rim of the sand dune here. Now I am going to take the exposure, come up here and you can adjust this, so I'm going to take this down to about 50%, just to take the brightness down a little bit so it's not so harsh. So we're going to go ahead and just brush over the tip here, and again, think about where shadows are going to fall. So for example, if the light's coming from the top corner here, this gateway is going to cause a shadow coming up here. So we're going to click Option again, we're going to go onto our burn tool, and we're going to brush in that shadow around here. And again, think about how the shadow is going to fall. So it's going to change direction over the tip here, and it's going to go down in a different direction. So keep all of this in mind when you go ahead and do this yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hardness up a little bit more to about 40%, just so I can make the edges of my shadow a little bit less blurred. So at the moment that's looking a little bit better. It's still looking a little bit fake, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the shadow in on this one as well. Okay, so we've done a rough bit of dodge and burn on the sand dunes. We don't want to do too much because the more you do, the more saturated and contrasty the sand dunes get. You just want to do a rough light and darks by using your dodge and burn tool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the same on the gateways here. So because the sun's coming from the other side, these two are going to be very dark. So we're going to basically, you can go ahead and you can click Alt and select this, and that's going to oscillate between being the dodge and being the burn, which I find sometimes easier just leaving it on the burn tool, and then we can just go ahead and brush over like this just to make it a little bit darker. We're going to go ahead and do it the same on the other side. There we go, so they're both looking pretty dark at the moment. Okay, so now we've done a rough light and darks. What we can do is we can use the final technique, which is just by using the brush tool and our blending modes up here, just to make it look that little bit better and blend everything in. So we're going to do a new layer above everything, select B or select our brush tool from up here, make sure our foreground color is on white. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're basically just going to paint in where the light should fall. So we're going to work on our sand dune, so drag this above our sand dune, and we're going to create a clipping mask. Now, a clipping mask basically pins the layer to the layer below it, so everything I do on this layer is going to affect the layer directly below it. We're going to do that by clicking Alt until we get this downwards arrow, and then we're just going to click. That means that everything I do will apply to the layer below it. So I'm basically going to paint in some white, and you can see there it only applies onto the layer below it. So we're going to make sure our hardness is down on 0% again, and we've got quite a large brush. I'm just going to brush in where the white should go, so around on the tips there, and as you can see, as I turn it on and off, it makes a difference on the sand dune. So we're going to press X, or we're going to select this, flip, and we're going to select our black as our foreground colour, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to brush in where we want the dark parts to be as well. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the opacity down to about 20%, because I just want to be focusing on this side here, brushing around and making sure our shadow looks a little bit better. So just below this side it's going to be a little bit darker, and then on the other side it's going to be a little bit lighter. So I want to make sure that that contrast between lights and darks is quite obvious. So we're basically just going to be reinforcing our shadows by using our brush tool, just to make sure it looks a little bit darker and less contrasty. So a way we can do that is by taking our opacity right down, make sure this looks a little bit more like a gradient, but from much darker to a little bit lighter. So the techniques we can use now is I like to use 3 different ones. We can either leave this on normal and adjust our opacity, or we can take this down to overlay, and that gives it that kind of effect, or on soft light, and it does it a little bit softer. So usually I find that because the dodge and burn gives it quite a contrasted look, and so does soft light and overlay, I like leaving it on normal and just kind of bringing down the opacity just a tad, and there we go, you can see the before and after of doing that. Okay, so I'm working on the gateway now, just by doing the same thing using darks and lights. So we want to select our dark as our foreground colour, and I've put it into soft light, and we're just going to go ahead and we're going to basically just brush around until we get the look that we really think works. So selecting white again, you can make areas lighter, and selecting black, you can make areas darker. So there we go guys, that is the end of today's tutorial. So I hope you guys have learned something from this. As I said, this image is not going to look great because it's not really what we've been aiming for in this tutorial, was to make a really good looking image. If you guys do want to see a final image from start to finish, that will of course be in tutorial 5, where we combine all of these techniques together. So today what we've done is basically shown you guys how you can cut different objects out of the sky, you can place new objects in, and you can blend things together. And then I've also gone ahead and I've shown you how you can go ahead and use lots of different techniques to make sure the lighting works in your image, and add some shadows, add some highlights, things like that. You can go ahead and you can use the dodge and burn tool, and you can also go ahead and use this technique of using the brush tool and changing your blend mode between normal, overlay, and soft light. So in the next video, we're going to be showing you guys how you can go ahead and you can create reflections, like water reflections, and make things look more realistic in that sense. So do stick around and watch that video when it comes out, and I hope you guys have enjoyed the series so far. So thanks for watching guys, we will see you guys in our next video.